Bien le bonjour! As the title implies, I'm going to talk about the many times the warrior appeared during the main series of Final Fantasy games, and if it wasn't directly there, I tried to pinpoint the closest thing. Before we start, I'd like to talk about one trivia related to the original Japanese name, Senshi. Since it can be translated as both warrior or fighter, they chose the latter for the first US localization of Final Fantasy I in 1990. And we had to wait for the Origins remake in 2003 on PlayStation for it to be officially renamed Warrior. The warrior class was always portrayed as a strong character wearing the heaviest armors and weapons, favoring HP, strength and more or less defense. As you can expect, it did have some weaknesses, such as an average or below average speed, but especially terrible magic stats and being unable to use spells. Even though it was one of the 6 first jobs or classes of the series, more often than not it wouldn't appear in other games because it was deemed too basic or too vanilla. It even went as far as being simply replaced by the knight or paladin that I will cover in future videos, save for 2 instances. In some games, the warrior was pretty much ripping off another job, the Berserker, so I'm also gonna cover the evolution of the latter here. The first game laid the foundations of what will be known as the warrior job of the Final Fantasy games. Little reminder of the vertical line setting in battle. The higher a character was, the more likely it would be targeted by physical enemy attacks. Therefore, the warrior was the most suitable to be put on top. Stats-wise, the warrior boasted the highest physical defense and HP between all the starting jobs, as well as the biggest damage output with weapons. However, since the first FF tried to balance things out and didn't really want you to create a team of 4 warriors, this job had some weaknesses. The warrior had the lowest intelligence that acted as both the magic defense and attack. The second problem, especially if you were a penny pincher or if you hated killing monsters repeatedly to acquire more gears, was that the warrior required the biggest amount of money to buy the best gear available for it, to withstand big hits and to keep its own damage output really high. But since you also leveled up your characters in the process, it's hard to consider this as an issue in the end, especially for an RPG. Last things to add, this time about the original Nes Sprites. Probably due to technical limitations, Square went for a red armor that would stay in the remakes, and red hair that was changed to blonde in a Japan-exclusive handheld console named the Wonderswan Color, which stayed that way in the subsequent remakes. However, it was this original sprite that was used for a minion in FF14 named the Minions of Light that can randomly call the Warrior, the White Mage or the Black Mage. A bit more subtle this time, the main antagonist during the Warrior story in FF14 until level 50 also has more or less unkempt red hair, which is harder to tell for his little brother that never takes off his helmet. The warrior, just like the other jobs, could be upgraded at some point in the game into a knight. I'll cover that part in a future video. Another refresher, this game had something called skill-based advancement, which would improve your character stats depending on your actions in battle, allowing you to shape them how you wanted. Therefore, we have to look at the character design, the starting equipments, and the base stats to pinpoint a warrior. Guy started with an axe, as well as the highest stamina that determined the growth of HP that were already the highest between the 3 permanent characters, and finally the highest strength. Adding to this his overall character design, Guy being tall, muscular and with some speech impediment, the designation of warrior seemed to fit this particular guy. We can conclude that he was the embodiment of the warrior, despite being able to be proficient in magic too. For those of you who had spotted it, in the NES, Firion had a sprite nearly identical to the FF1 warrior, while Guy had a colored swap thief sprite. This choice was probably again caused by the technical limitations. Fortunately, each of them gained their own sprites in the Wonderswan Color remake and the subsequent ones. Just one last trivia, this time regarding the Berserker. There wasn't any character or class, but it was the first time this status appeared, although it was actually a big physical damage buff that could also be stacked without negative effect. Back to the job system, and just like in the first game, between all the first jobs you could unlock, the warrior had a big HP pool, high strength, and was able to wear the heaviest armors as well as a variety of weapons. In the original version, it became useless once you unlocked the second batch of jobs, since the knight was better in every way, save for the more restrained choice of weapons. In the DS1, the warrior saw its stat boosted so it could be used throughout the game and got itself a new exclusive skill, Advanced. This skill was an improved attack, hence the name, that would sacrifice your physical defense to deal more damages until your next turn. The damage inflicted and received were boosted by the warrior job level. Wait, I wasn't done yet! I still need to talk about the Viking class! If you went far enough in the Shadowbringers expansion of Final Fantasy XIV, you may recognize the sprite's influence on the level 78 armor's design, especially the one for the tanks, which makes a lot of sense considering what this class was capable of. This job could only equip axes and hammers as weapons, another point in common with the warrior in FF14, although the hammer is just a skin. It could wear the heaviest armors as well as most of the shields, which granted it the almost highest defense in the original NES version. In the 3D remakes, its defense was toned down, but it got an exclusive skill named Provoke. After using it, the target will have its physical defense reduced and will more likely attack the Viking that provoked it. The chances of drawing attention could go up to 100%, while the defense debuff could reach -50% at level 99. Knowing that Provoke always had the initiative over even enemies' skills, it was extremely handy when the Viking was set in the back row with 2 shields, making it the most resilient tank of the game, which turned out to be its only real selling point since it was the slowest class and had an average strength. Unfortunately, despite a lot of diversity and some of the characters being able to wear heavy armors, none of them was a warrior, even in Interlude and the After Years. Paladin, Dark Knight, Dragoon, I'll cover them in other videos. The Berserker status came back after its noticeable absence from the previous game. Increasing strength by 50%, it also had for the first time the adverse effect of making the victim impossible to control anymore, and it would only use the attack command on random targets. This issue will become a staple of this status in all of the other games, save for some cases that I won't forget to mention. As weird as it sounds, there was no warrior despite the job swapping system making a comeback. There was, however, a job that got really close, the Knight, that could equip shields, armors and swords, and pass these as abilities to other jobs respectively at level 4, 5 and 6. At level 3, it would unlock the two-handed ability, allowing you to ignore your shield slot so you could use your weapon with both hands, which meant sacrificing defense to deal significantly more damages. Throwback to the Knight jobs of FF1 and 3, it wasn't able to directly use white magic though. Finally, I can't ignore the first appearance of the Berserker job. Although it was able to wear the same protections as the Knight, sadly it could only equip knives as well as the axes and hammers, on top of having just 2 job levels. Berserk, the passive ability associated to the class by default, that could be transferred at level 1 and worked exactly like the status in FF4. Equip axes at level 2, no need to dwell on that. I'll get back to the other abilities in the Paladin video, which was the name chosen in the French localization. No warrior again, the two-handed ability was unlocked through a relic, the Gauntlet, although not all weapons were concerned. The heavy armors could only be worn by those few characters. What about the Berserker then? Outside of the exact same status as FF4 and 5, there was a hidden character called Umaro that acted the same way as the Berserker job in the 5th. It was even hairier since it was a Yeti. It had the highest base values of HP, strength and defense, but you could not change its equipments that included a bone club and a snow scarf. As opposed to the previous games, it could execute a skill other than a simple attack, body slamming the opponent to deal a bit more damages. Okay, I'm pulling your leg. You could at least change its accessories or relics. Two of them even granted Umaro new abilities: the Berserker Ring and the Blizzard Orb. The first granted it the ability to throw an ally on an enemy, and the second gave it an AoE ice spell hitting every opponent. Huh, magic. That was new. If only it didn't use those skills randomly. Talking about randomly using abilities, how about we take a look at the character Gau? Between the Berserker and the Blue Mage, this wild boy had a skill, only available in one part of the world, named Leap, that made him disappear from the party for a few fights. He would then learn new rages that depended on the monsters you fought when he left and when he came back. Each rage was supposed to mimic a boss or a monster, with its bad and good status effects. Although I have some strong doubts regarding some of those rages. Considering that rage replaced the attack command and that once you used one of them, you wouldn't be able to control Gau, it's hard to not see the influence of the Berserker class or the Berserk status in general, although the quantity of skills available was infinitely superior. And we're gonna stop here for today. Prenez soin de vous et amusez-vous bien.